Well, hello there, and welcome to the next episode of the Enneagram in a Movie. I'm not still sure, TJ, what we're calling this podcast, video cast, whatever, but it's been fun so far, and we've been covering some great stuff. So we're going to continue with things we liked from 2024 now that we're well into 2025. And this was my television pick for 2024, and it is the Apple Plus TV show Slow Horses, starring Gary Oldman and based on the series of novels of crime, or not crime, spy thrillers by Mick Herron. TJ, you weren't familiar with this TV show, or maybe you hadn't seen it, I think, prior to us deciding to talk about this. Is that correct?
That's right. It's one of those ones I've heard about. It gets nominated for Emmys. I actually don't know if it's won any, but it's one of those of the many, many TV shows out there now. This is one of the ones that's been rising to the top that I've been hearing about and thinking, I really should get around to watching that. So this
Yeah,
recording this was a good kick in the ass to actually watch it, which I
yeah,
appreciate because
yeah.
I hugely enjoyed it.
Yeah, and so there are four seasons of this show, and I think it started airing in 2022. I believe I kind of, discovered it in early 2024, and sort of binge watched all the seasons, and really really enjoyed. There are four seasons, two more in the works, from what I understand, and so I know that in preparation for this, you watched the first episode of season one, and then all of season four. So there's some gaps in in your knowledge, which is quite fine. I mean, kind of that's how I was with what we do in the shadows. But let me just ask, what was your reaction to the show?
Love it. One thing to mention is that a season is short. It's only six
Yes,
episodes.
right, right,
Episodes are roughly an hour,
yeah,
more or less.
hmm
So it's not a huge demand and it moves.
yes,
And I thought it straddles a really interesting line. And of course, I say this as somebody who has no direct experience or direct knowledge of what spycraft is actually like.
mm,
But like I thought it straddled the line pretty well of the more probably what's realistic in terms of what it's like to be an intelligence agent
yeah,
versus the romantic kind of Hollywood version where there's a
right,
lot more action.
right, right.
It gives you both.
Yeah, and so the premise of this, just for anybody who hasn't watched it, and just to kind of recap for people who have, is Slow Horses is a reference to spies who have kind of screwed up, right? MI5 agents in the UK who have screwed up in one way or another and have landed in this sort of home for misfit toys, overseen by Gary Oldman's character, whose name is Jackson Lamb, and it's hard not to be a Gary Oldman fan if you love movies, and it's hard not to appreciate his range. But boy, this is really something different, even for him, and just a fantastic portrayal. But he plays a kind of, I don't know if I would call him, if grizzled is quite the right word, right? But certainly a well broken in intelligence operative who was quite brilliant, and who had a lot of experience in Cold War Berlin before. I think how he describes it in season four is, you know what? I just wanted to kind of be somewhere where I could be left alone and kind of mark time till retirement, right? And so he ends up overseeing this group of, again, misfits who get, sent there to a building called Slough House, which ends up being kind of shortened into Slow Horses, and that's what they're called. Um, and he's a very disdainful kind of character. He, really enjoys poking a finger in the eye of all things proper and appropriate, including being a strategic user of farts for, to make his point at different times. Right? I mean, this is a theme that comes out. He's, probably an alcoholic. He looks like he has not bathed in quite some time. Um, and he is, he comes across as indifferent and in fact disdainful of the people that work for him. But as you see throughout, he really has a big heart and he cares quite a deal for these, and even putting his life in jeopardy, multiple times for them. So talk about Gary Oldman here, TJ, in this role. What was your reaction to him?
He seemed like a perfect five to me.
Yeah,
Gary Oldman's one of those actors that transforms himself completely from role to role. So he'll embody different Enneagram types perfectly.
yeah,
So I have no idea what his actual type is because I haven't looked him up in interviews. Who is the person behind the roles? I don't know.
yeah,
Uh, he could be a five. He could be that remote
yeah,
in real life, but whether he is or whether he isn't, his character of Jackson Lamb has all these five-ish characteristics, like you mentioned. He's disdainful, he's caustic, he's impolite. His office is a mess, and he likes it that way. Like one thing that happens in season 4 is someone new gets sent to Slough House, and she cleans up his office. She organizes all of his stuff, and he admonishes her for that. So, he forbids
yeah,
her from ever coming in and touching anything. He wants it
yeah,
messy. He
yeah.
often sleeps on the couch in his office. He often drinks on the job. He
Mhm,
lies strategically. He's obscure and he's brilliant. All of these five things, like you
mhm,
described, you sum up type five as striving to feel detached.
mhm.
So there is that, in
Yeah,
terms of I don't care about social niceties.
right,
I don't care about proper procedures. I don't care about the people who work for me, although he actually does,
right.
which is the secret behind a lot of fives.
Yes, yes. And there's also this, it's this indifference to the social niceties, right? It's I'm just going to say what is on my mind, and if you don't like it, that's too bad. Just we talked before about fives enjoying trolling, right? In some way, kind of needling people and all that sort of thing, and that is certainly there, and we certainly see some of that in Jackson Lamb. But I think that most of it is just I don't have the energy and time and inclination and probably ability to sugarcoat anything, right? So I'm just going to say it to you, and chips fair where they may. And what happens with many fives is people end up becoming really, really frustrated with him, but they also recognize that it's not really personal. I think, right? I mean, it's when somebody treats everybody that way, it's hard to take personally. You just kind of figure, well, that's just how they are, right? And I think this is one of the reasons that fives can kind of get by with some of this less than um, sensitive social behavior at times because there doesn't seem to be any malice behind it.
But something Russ Hudson, who is a five, has said is that a five can often be described as an eight squeezed into a skull. So, in a very eight-ish way, a lot of what you
Mhm.
describe is him testing people,
Yeah,
very much like eights tend to do. I'll take the measure of someone.
yeah,
And whereas an eight might take the measure of someone in terms of like, what are you made of? Are you decisive? Are you authentic? Do you have integrity? A
yeah,
five might similarly test someone in terms of like, are you smart enough to be worth my attention?
yeah,
Do your feathers get ruffled by my lack of social niceties to the point that it discombobulates you and you can't think and can't contribute anything intelligent to what I'm doing? Because if so, we're done.
yeah.
I have no interest in it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, again, with the Gary Oldman character, or with Gary Oldman as this character, one of my favorite Gary Oldman performances, and I'm a big Gary Oldman fan. And you're right, he really can shapeshift like few actors. I always think of him as in his almost a cameo in um, True Romance, right, where he played the pimp, unrecognizable, right? And dreadlocks, gold teeth, this kind of fake Jamaican, sort of, was it Jamaican? No, I guess it was just kind of like, yeah, just a real put on, street slang sort of accent or affect that he came on with. And another one that was so completely different was the oh shoot, I'm drawing a blank on the name of it now. The movie with Sean Penn and Robin Wright, where they play, street, an Irish mob gang in Hell's Kitchen, Lower Manhattan, which is just a wonderful, wonderful movie. It's going to drive me crazy not to be able to remember the name of it, but he's just such an over the top character in that, kind of like he was in the uh, boy, I'm really drawing blanks on names now. The professional with
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, was it Jean Reno, the actor, and
Yep. And Natalie Portman.
Natalie Portman as a child. Yeah, so just this real over the top sort of character. But here I would say he's absolutely a five. I would probably say he's kind of a transmitting five. Okay. And the transmitting five is it's interesting, because other people refer to it as the sexual subtype. And for me, it's really not about that, right? It's about having this information that needs to come out of me, right? This thing that's kind of going one way. This, real life can be a lack of filter in particular, but it's just this need to sort of, in a way, educate, particularly in the transmitting five, right? They're this font of information, and and with a lot of the subtypes, we talk about them being sort of a peacock. Well, this is a pretty motley peacock, okay, in this way, right? But he does still do things that draw attention to himself, right? I mean, just by his appearance and his affect and so forth. So I feel pretty confident in putting him into the, kind of the bucket of a transmitting five character. Yeah. You know. They're the ones that tend to have the worst social skills, quite frankly, or the most abrasive social skills, I'll say very often. Not all of them are abrasive, but, the transmitting five can be really abrasive. So a lot of the characters we've seen, like pretty much any Benedict Cumberbatch character when he plays a five, like Sherlock or, that sort of thing, is playing a transmitting
Absolutely.
five. Okay. Um,
Sherlock, his performance as Sherlock is so rude. It's
yes,
amazingly entertaining.
yes, yes. And
Like
Jackson
that's
Lamb
part
is
of why you watch that.
Yes, and Jackson Lamb is right up there with this. Yeah, I mean, he's pretty darn close to that kind of rude. So, all right, so let's talk about some of the other characters. But before we do that, I'm going to set the show up a little bit more. So again, it is this, kind of a spy series based on this set of novels about the British intelligence service. It reminds me a bit of Jean Le Carré, kind of a modernized and, lighter version, if anything, right? But I couldn't help but think of the character Smiley, as I'm watching this show, although Smiley was a much quieter and more reserved character, but there's still that kind
Also
of
played
vibe.
by,
Yes, so that's right. In the movie version of was it Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy?
yep,
Gary Oldman. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I'll tell you another thing I liked about these series. So every once in a while, there's a series where when I'm looking for something to watch on TV, I think I'd really like to watch something like blank, right? I wish, I could repeat that experience. One of my favorite of those is the series, The Looming Tower, which was on, I want to say Hulu, about the attack on the World Trade Center, the things leading up to that on 9/11. And I don't know if you've seen that series or not, but I highly recommend it. Jeff Daniels is one of the lead characters. I think it's 4 episodes, and it's based on the book by Lawrence Wright, The Looming Tower, which was a very well researched depiction of what led up to the 9/11 attacks. Um, and I've watched it a couple of times because it's just so darn good and engrossing. And I hate to call it entertaining, but it's thrilling, right? I mean, it really is this thing that keeps you on the seat of your pants, and it's so well made. And Slow Horses is different, but it's still, I just like everything about it, right? I mean, it's intelligent, it's thoughtful, it's funny, it's suspenseful. I think the last episode in season 4 is as exciting as anything I've ever seen in a TV show. I mean, just the tension and the intensity and everything is just fantastic. I also like that it doesn't seem like it was filmed through blue gauze. Which is kind of what happens with so many of these kind of TV shows, right? Like what is it, The Agency, I think, with Richard Gere and
Michael Fassbender.
Michael Fassbender, exactly, and Jeffrey Wright and some others. I just can't watch it because I'm just so tired of watching these shows that are just, this blue saturation kind of look, that just bore me to death. But this is vivid in color, and I just love everything about this series. Uh,
Well,
any thoughts on that aspect of it?
yeah, I get the sense that there is action in it. There are chases, there are assassinations, there's gunplay, but nowhere near the level of summer blockbuster.
Right, right,
So I don't think any of it's filmed on a soundstage. I don't,
right.
apart from like probably the
The
office set,
Office, yeah,
but like there's a lot of location filming,
yeah,
and the action in it isn't over the top, although it is
right,
thrilling.
right.
So it's not like they have to do it all on a green screen. Like
Yes,
it's not anything I have ever experienced or witnessed, but it feels true to life. It
yes,
feels quite plausible.
yes, yes. Yes, for sure. And a lot of it is, there's a lot of racing against time that happens throughout the series, right? Season one is all about trying to rescue a young guy who's going to be beheaded by terrorists, British homegrown terrorists, by dawn the next day. And so there's, all this tension around time, and that's one of the things about it, right? I mean, it's not just, um, Tom Cruise driving his motorcycle off of a cliff and then parachuting, or something like that, right? So much more
Which I
realistic.
enjoy as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. I
You
mean,
know,
there's
when that kind
nothing.
of thing is well done, bring it
Yes,
on.
exactly right. I mean, for me, watching that Mission Impossible movie where Tom Cruise is riding the motorcycle through the streets of Paris is just fantastic. I love it. But this is, it's to your point, it's a bit more realistic. So,
Yeah,
um,
you never see James Bond or Ethan Hunt, the Tom Cruise Mission Impossible character, in an environment like Slough House,
right, right.
or having to be subordinate to a boss who's like Jackson Lamb.
Yes, yes,
You know,
and
it's like, let's get to the action and let's get there
yes,
soon, as
y-
opposed to a lot of like figuring things out
yes.
and conversations, as well as I think a major element in the show is navigating, which
Mhm.
I don't see so much in Mission Impossible or James Bond. But, you
Yeah,
know, as you described, the premise of the series is very much about like disgraced spies or spies who are like at the tail end of their career get sent to this place. So there's very much a intrinsic to the premise is who's in and who's out.
yes,
And if
yes,
someone's out, how do they become out? And are they
yes,
out permanently, or is there a way to get back in? So there's the very clear ranking of which station do you work at, and how do you get treated if you go from the
yes,
lesser station to the higher station, like to deliver a message or something like that, as well as
yes,
how much information are you given? Who can you trust? Who are
yes.
you in bed with? Who's who's angling for what? A lot of interdepartmental navigating.
Yes. Excellent observation. I completely agree with you. I mean, it is really about these people being outcasts and about, status issues. And because they have to still interact with and engage with and work with the people who are the more elite back at headquarters. And so the people who have been relegated to Slough House, particularly the main guy, River Cartwright, who's, one of the central characters, whose grandfather, played by the incredible Jonathan Pryce, is a kind of legendary spy, and he's trying to live up to his reputation. And with some of his, peers and that sort of thing. And so, yeah, absolutely. It is all about status. It's all about palace intrigue. It's all about the, the strategic sharing and withholding of information, throughout, all very navigating activities. Yeah, it's an excellent um, observation. So let's talk about some of the other characters as Enneagram types, because I think there are some real vivid ones. So before we started recording, we were talking about the actress Kristin Scott Thomas, who is in this, and she plays the um, um, I forget exactly what her title is. She's not first chair, so she's not kind of the number one person, but she's number two, right? And so she's, a very powerful person who has influence over what the goings on in Slough House. Um, And
Yeah, she's at the more prestigious station,
yes, yes,
richer, much nicer place.
yes,
That's the one everybody wants to be at. So she's, if not at the very top, close to the very top of that.
yes,
So
yes.
she's the one that people answer to.
Yes, in the first season, she reports to I forget the character's name, but she was referred to as first chair, right? I mean, that's the head of the intelligence services, I think. And then she's reporting to another guy in the fourth season who is in that role. And but thoughts on her Enneagram type, TJ?
We had talked about, like, I think you mentioned this before I ever watched it, so I had this in mind of
Right,
her as a one, which makes sense watching it. She's very upright, she's very appropriate. Uh, at one point in season four, there's talk about the guy who is first chair in her department. There was the possibility that that was a promotion that would come to her, and it
right,
doesn't.
right.
And yet she still acts without resentment to him. It's like, I'm here to do a job. I'm here. I have responsibility. I will do it well to the best of my ability. I will not undermine you, even when I completely disagree with you. So she's got her eye on what's right.
Yes,
I'm going to do what's right. So very one-ish, as well
yes,
as that one-ish affect. Like she just has a gravitas and a dignity to her that you
yes.
usually see with ones.
Yeah, and dignity is a good word there, right? Because it's dignity in this bearing, right? Now, what's interesting to this, and an important thing to understand about ones, and I know you didn't watch the rest of the first season, but she's not a pure person, right? I mean, she's doing some pretty questionable things in order to further her agenda, right? Now, it's not necessarily self-serving agenda, but she's kind of doing some deals with the devil, and that lead to people being killed and all these sort of things, and then covering it up and having to make deals with Jackson Lamb to ensure that these things, stay hidden. So, we tend to fall into a lot of us can fall into the trap of thinking that ones are, always morally upstanding sort of characters, and not really, right? That's not necessarily the case. They're just striving to feel perfect, even if their connotation of what's perfect is not what the rest of us might consider to be ethical necessarily, right? But there was an interesting description. I asked Claude AI to kind of give a brief description of a lot of the characters, and it said for her, Deputy Director General of MI5, known as, quote, Lady Di behind her back, cold, calculating, and ruthlessly effective, Taverner frequently finds herself both opposing and reluctantly collaborating with Lamb's team. Scott Thomas embodies Taverner's steel spine determination and political maneuvering, showing how she maintains power in the male dominated intelligence community. Um, so, to your theme of instinctual bias, I would suggest that she's probably a navigating type one character, right? She's really, really politically savvy and astute. Thoughts?
She's very aware that she's part of an elaborate institution.
Yeah,
So that is a setting in which navigating is quite often going to be a prominent
yeah,
theme
yeah.
of how do I operate within this elaborate institution, especially if I might have what seems to be points against me, like I'm a woman in a male-dominated field.
Hmm. Yeah,
How do I act? Who do I trust?
yes,
What information do I give to who? It's very strategic, very political. That's all the navigating domain.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. Um, Another good type one character, I think, type one is River Cartwright's grandfather. And what the heck was his first name? I know the actor is Jonathan Price, and I forget the name of um, the character's first name in the show, but
David,
David, thank you. And but again, a very rigid, very self-certain, probably more of a transmitting one kind of character, right? This intense, almost this eight-ish intensity that comes through. And again, one of the things we find in one of the later seasons is that he, again, he has his hands dirty, as almost everybody in this field probably would, with some pretty questionable moral decisions that were taken for what he perceived as the greater good. Um, Now, when we see him in season 4, he's suffering from dementia, and so it's a little bit harder to read his personality type than it is in some of the earlier um, seasons. Any thoughts on that character?
Yeah, well, having only seen the season in
Yeah,
which he's suffering from dementia, I mean, there isn't anyone who wouldn't be distressed by that,
yeah,
by the sense of like I'm losing my grip on my cognitive functions. But for
hmm,
a one whose whole life is dedicated to doing what's right and having control of his mind to execute it,
hmm,
particularly distressing. How do I know what the right thing to do is
yeah,
when I can't necessarily trust my own perception? How do I know if I'm in a window of lucidity, much
hmm,
less a window of delusion?
yeah, yeah. Good. Um, Anything else on that character before we move on?
Well, just, you mentioned the similarity between him and the Kristin Scott Thomas character in terms of both being ones, both who have done some questionable things. I wouldn't mind hearing you speak on this, because as you said, it's easy to paint ones monochromatically as somebody who's Joan of Arc. I will
Yeah,
do the right thing, even if it costs me my life, no matter
yeah,
what. I will stand in the fires of hell and not lose my integrity. As opposed to, I might have got my hands dirty. I might have made some questionable decisions, but it's still within the framework of all of that is in service of what I believe is right.
yes, yeah. Yeah, and so we so with the with the one, what's driving them, from my view, is this striving of feeling perfect. Okay, I have to follow what is right, but what is right is subjective in a sense, right? In fact, the way we talk about the type one is that they lose contact with the core quality of objectivity. It becomes stunted in them, right? And so, because they don't feel like I can really kind of sit back and look at each situation and judge it on its merits and see things without illusion and clouding and subjectivity, well, I have to create this set of rules. Okay. And I have to follow that set of rules. And some of those set of rules can be out of order with, what society more broadly deems as ethical behavior. There's a great book by Aaron Beck called Prisoners of Hate. Now, Aaron Beck was kind of the founder of cognitive behavioral therapy. He's still alive. I believe he's still alive. He's in his 90s now, and he's based near Philadelphia, where I live. And in the book Prisoners of Hate, the point he makes is that everybody thinks they're doing the right thing, right? Even if they're not, right? He said, look, even the Nazis thought they were doing the right thing. Okay. And, and this is what, the concept of cognitive dissonance is all about, too, right? If you read the work of Festinger and Aronson and these people, it's cognitive dissonance is how we maintain this sense of feeling right about ourselves and good, and so we can justify that, and so the whole idea behind cognitive behavioral therapy is that we think we're right, but our stories are wrong, and so we have to fix the stories so that we can be right in a better way. Okay. So yeah, so ones, there are lots of ones out there who are criminals and serial killers, and I don't know any personally, but I mean, they're not all choir boys necessarily, right? Or people who make, the right decision all the time. But they all share a certainty, right? Of, this is how it's supposed to be. So we see a lot of, even like cult leaders. I recently watched most of a miniseries about Waco and David Koresh. And that character kind of struck me as one-ish, right? Of, I've got this vision of what God wants. And by every kind of moral norm, it was not okay, right? He was taking everybody's wives and he was, marrying, 12-year-olds and all this stuff, right? But he was convinced that this is what God wants me to do. This is the right thing to do. So yeah, it's really important that we make that distinction, okay? And not assume that everyone is an upstanding paragon of moral or ethical behavior.
And if I'm hearing you right, it sounds like there's a distance between how ones like to perceive themselves, which is as objective,
Yes,
versus how they tend to actually be, which is
yes.
their ideologues.
Yeah, yes, you're absolutely right. And again, there's variation on these. All these things are on a continuum. But yes, and this is this is the key issue for ones. I don't trust my own objectivity, so I need a set of rules. Now, this is not to say that ones can't grow into being discerning people, right? But that's the growth arc for them where they let go. We go back to the mayor in Chocolat, right? It's no, I'm bound by these rules, and you're breaking these rules. Javert from Les Miserables, the same thing, right? These are what the rules are, and I will do cruel things to enforce the rules, right? It's Bligh on Mutiny and the Bounty, and so forth. So yeah, cruelty in the name of what's right is different from you know, um, true goodness, you could say.
And part of that would be the ability to just check in and assess in every situation what's
Absolutely.
really going on. And
Absolutely.
are the rules that I've set up for myself applicable here?
Yes.
Will that actually bring about the greatest good? Or
Yes.
am I telling myself what I want to hear?
Yes. Yes. So it's learning to question our certainty about the rules, right? And okay, is this really the case? Is one of the growth paths for the one. Um,
Which goes hand in hand with all the five-ishness in slow horses, because fives are very much about like, let us see what's actually going on. Let's see
yes.
past all the things that we like to flatter ourselves with. Let's see
Yes.
past the social niceties. Let's look at the cold, brutal reality, and let's
Yes.
act from that.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. It's interesting because um, we put the core quality of objectivity at point one. And, I've had people kind of push back on me and say, well, that should be at five, right? But it's a bit different because what we see as the core sort of issue for five is um, is around intuition and inner knowing and not learning or not being comfortable in trusting that. Okay, and that's the growth path for the one for the five is to get out and actually engage with the world so the intellect becomes intuition through practice. Okay. Just like anything else, we don't become intuitive at it. I'm looking at your background there and you have guitars, right? Well, you don't become an intuitive guitarist without lots and lots of practice. Okay. And this is the challenge that ones have. They're always learning, they're always studying. They never get to the practice part to create that sort of intuition. Now, this doesn't mean that they don't have great
Fives, you
intuitive
mean?
fives. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
This doesn't mean that they may not have great intuitive insights at times, but it's the point of tension for them. And for the one, the point of tension is around objectivity and what's real objectivity and what's not. Okay.
And is
So
and is intuition something that you see with Jackson Lamb?
so he's a great example of somebody who is really, really, really smart and really, really experienced, right? Because something that they only kind of refer to a couple of times. There's a comment, I think it's in season 4, where somebody says he has more in the field experience than everybody in this room combined. Okay. So even though he's a five, he's been out there, right? And again, it made me think of the spy who came in from the cold, right? The great Jean Le Carre movie, So this is a guy who was out there living with his life in danger 24/7 for years and years and years. And so that takes that intellect and it embodies it in so to where intuition will come out. Okay. So my guess is that like most great thinkers, Jackson Lamb was probably highly intuitive because he had seen so many things and thought about so many things that things just came faster to him, right? Without him actually having to think about it. And this is what we see. This is really what intuition is, right? People think that intuition is something that comes from inside of us, devoid of experience, devoid of knowledge, devoid of practice. It doesn't, right? Real intuition is born of all those things. So, so I think that he's probably, to again reiterate, he's somebody who's highly intuitive, again, kind of like Sherlock, right? But also highly analytical at the same time, and they just kind of work together to make him even more brilliant. I would
And
put,
in season four,
yeah, go ahead.
you do see him outside of the office like a fair bit.
Yeah, yeah,
He
yeah.
goes to a crime scene. He makes
Yes,
on the spot decisions.
yes,
One of the major plot threads in season four is that there's an assassin from France who is wreaking
yes,
havoc
yes,
and pursuing and killing different spies. And
yes,
he gets right in there. Like he doesn't
yes.
just sit in his office and send people out to deal with it.
Yeah, he runs him over with a car, and
Exactly.
and then at the end, hits him in the head with a bottle. Right? I mean, this is a real hard to kill guy, right? The assassin. Yeah, so absolutely right. He's not just somebody who's kind of sitting in the office thinking and giving people direction. You're absolutely right. He is out there,
Totally.
wearing the shoe leather down quite a bit. So.
Yeah, he's not arguing about how many angels can dance on the head of a pin.
Absolutely, absolutely. So speaking of bad guys, let's talk about Hugo Weaving for a moment and that character, which is funny to see because Hugo Weaving is the I think he's Australian actor
Yeah,
who was one of the agents in the Matrix, and he's got that
Agent
way of
Smith. He was the main
Agent
one.
Smith, right? Yeah, and he's got that way of talking, right? That so Mister, kind of thing, and so it's so funny to hear that voice coming out of this, really scary kind of bad guy, right? And it could almost, because as I was thinking about his Enneagram type, I was thinking, you know, uh, I, he's got that kind of laconic pace to his voice, right? Um, but I think the character was an eight. I don't know. Any thoughts from you?
I didn't have a clear read on him, but it's somewhere between 8 and 5 was
Yeah,
my guess.
yeah,
Because he's the head of a rogue spy unit. He's an ex-CIA guy, and he runs this team of assassins in France. So he's off grid. So he's got a lot of five-ish secrecy to him.
yeah,
He's also incredibly tactical, very intelligent. Not that eights can't be that, right? But
hmm,
there's that combination of 8 and 5.
yeah,
There's a
yeah,
direct connection between these two
yeah,
types in the architecture
yeah,
of the Enneagram.
yeah,
And he's very action oriented, and he
yeah.
is brutal, and he will make hard decisions when he needs to
Yes, yeah.
and act on them.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Those are the two types that I was going back and forth between. I just saw kind of an embodiedness in the character that didn't quite strike me as five-ish, right? I mean, he seemed comfortable in his own body, in a way that, certainly Jackson Lamb doesn't, right? I mean, Jackson Lamb, I mean, it's almost like his body is, an unfortunate encumbrance that he has to drag through life, right?
Often seen with fives.
Yeah, yeah. It's this tendency to be in their head. Where with I felt that the Hugo Weaving character just had a much more embodied malevolence to him, and there was also this kind of weird, almost creating his own private army through impregnating women, kind of thing, right? That struck me as more eightish than five-ish, in a way. So, but I thought he was wonderful in this, and it's clear that he's
Yeah,
going to come
agreed.
back in future episodes. So it'll be fun to see where they go with this character. Yeah. Um, go ahead.
Yeah, and you're right. He comes off as a tough guy,
Yeah.
which is more typically seen with eights than with
Right.
fives.
Right.
Like he's
Yeah.
physically intimidating.
Yes. Yes. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's that scene where he's telling River, they're in the restaurant, and River's thinking he's safe there, because they're in public, and he says, "No, don't think you're safe. If I wanted you dead, I would reach across, I would slice your femoral artery, with a knife, and before your head hit the table, I'd be on my way out the door, and nobody would ever know what happened, kind of thing." And and I'm like, yeah, he's an eight. You know, it's like, yeah, that's an eight. So, eh,
And like we've talked about with eights, he
yeah.
says this without raising his voice.
Yes, yeah,
He doesn't have to convince you that he's tough or that he's threatening. He
right,
just is. And he
right,
says this not with any quickening of his heartbeat,
right.
but he's stating a fact as plain as if he were saying, your eyes are this color,
Yes,
your hair is this color. This is the simple fact of the situation.
yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. Lots of eights, lots of eightish energy in this, right? There's a lot of five stuff. There's a lot of one stuff, like we've talked about, but there's also a lot of eights. My favorite, well, not favorite, but a couple of other examples of this. I would say that the dogs as a whole are very eightish, right? And so let's see, in season 4, you missed, the character arc of the first lead dog. And the dogs are kind of like the muscle that the MI5, like the SWAT team, and the muscle that MI5 brings in for the more, get your hands dirty sort of activities. And it's kind of like, okay, release the hounds, to, because I couldn't figure. I still don't know why they call them the dogs, but that's kind of what they are. And so the first head of the dogs is the character's name is Nick Duffy, and very much an eightish character. And again, I think pretty much all of the dogs that they portray are eights. And the woman who plays the head dog in season 4, the blonde woman, whose name is Emma Flight. She struck me as very eightish as well. Thoughts on that?
I, yeah, I can't recall her, so I
So
have
yeah, so
nothing to
she was
contribute.
the one. She was the attractive blonde woman who was in the car with River when the assassin was shooting them up, and
Right.
she ends up fighting him, and that sort of thing. So that character.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a fair assessment to me.
Yeah. All right. The other one, and this is more of a just while we're on the topic of eights, the character of Louisa Guy, the black woman who is one of the dogs, probably more of a navigating eight. She's not as kind of aggressive and tough, but throughout the series, I mean, I think she's somebody who always comes across as very grounded and action oriented and willing to take control. And so probably an eightish character as well. One more character I wanted to talk about is two more characters. One is we'll save for. Well, there's a few actually. Roddy Ho, the technology guy, who is I don't know. I guess kind of the Q of Slough House, right? Who every time they need to find out where somebody is, they go to him. Thoughts on his Enneagram type?
That role, because a lot of shows like
Yeah,
that have that role,
yeah,
is almost always a five.
hmm,
Like that's the person who just lives in front of a bank of computers. And if
yes,
there's some difficult technological thing you need, not only when you ask them, can they do it, they're
yeah,
kind of insulted that you might have even wondered if they could do it.
yeah,
So I saw a lot of five-ishness in him with that.
uh huh, yeah. See,
Like the
I
condescending, intellectually superior
yeah.
tech genius.
Yeah, I would, with him, I would kind of go with 7, actually,
Huh.
right?
Yeah.
Because there's that distractibility. There's that, like he's always playing video games. He's always blasting loud music. He's always flirting with people and saying, offensive things. In the last season, it's around Christmas time, so he's got mistletoe hanging over his chair, right? So, and always making inappropriate comments, that sort of thing. So and he's also like there's one in one of the intermediate seasons, they go out to his car and it's this flashy yellow, kind of souped up car. So I saw him as kind of a transmitting seven, actually, with just kind of that high energy. But I hear what you're saying about the stereotype. Okay? His affect just struck me differently.
Well, one of the plot threads, it's a really minor one in
Yeah.
season 4, is that he believes he has a girlfriend online. And one of the other characters helps him realize that no, that's a bot.
Right. Right.
And that character is J.K. Koh, who, if people remember him, never takes down the hood of his hoodie.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that guy seemed pretty five-ish to me as
Now
well.
that
Obscure, smart,
yes.
nihilistic,
Yes. Yes.
and again, condescending. It's much less likely that a five would get snookered by a catfishing.
Yes.
Much more likely that a five would be the one that figures it out and points it out to somebody in a way
Yeah.
that's really unflattering to them.
Yeah. That is a great character, and the one you're referring to, and it looks like in the next season he has a much bigger role, which I'll be happy to see. There's that great scene where they're being attacked by the assassin in the office, and he's boiling water, for tea, and then the woman says, "This is not time for tea, you freak," kind of thing, and and then he takes it and throws it on the bad guy. So it was great.
Totally.
Yeah.
Hard to dodge a
Yeah.
big splash of boiling water.
So let's see. So we've got Roddy Ho. There was also Spider Webb. Now, he was more from the first season, which you didn't watch all of. He was the guy that kind of looked like a um, kind of a very upper crust David Bowie sort of thing with the blonde hair and whatnot. A really great navigating three character who has a big part in the first season arc. And Catherine Standish, the assistant to Jackson Lamb, couldn't tell whether she was a six or a seven. I'm sorry, six or a five. Sorry, is what I meant to say. The role was kind of six-ish, although the affect was a bit more five-ish, I thought. I don't know. Any thoughts on that one? Yeah,
Again, yeah, it's up in the air for me.
yeah,
But the five was my guess. She's
yeah,
pretty cold, caustic,
yeah,
private.
yeah, yeah.
And the thing about Spider Web, something I've noticed is that it's not unusual for a three to in a supporting role to be a nemesis, to be this
Yes,
shiny, more successful, intimidating person. So he's kind of
yes,
he's the antagonist for River
yes,
Cartwright. He's the
yes.
one that like they train together, they're the same age, and he needles River about the fact that like you're at Slough House because you screwed up on your test. Whereas look at me and look at how great I'm doing. When in fact it's not. River correctly points out that he's basically working HR, even though it's at the better place.
Right,
But threes
right.
can be this like, look at how great I am. So that's a good way to get the audience on the side of the person who's intimidated by them,
Yes.
because it's easy to see threes one-dimensionally like that.
Yes, yes. And your use of the word nemesis is an appropriate one there for River Cartwright. And he's kind of the last character that I wanted to talk about. If there's a main character in the show, you could argue that it's River, right? I mean, the series sort of starts off focused on him and his, descent to Slough House and so forth. It's very much an ensemble show, but I think that he's probably, again, if you could say there's a central character throughout, it's probably him. And I saw him as a nine, right? Hard to, there's not, like huge nine-ish things that we see. It's almost the lack of signifiers, right? And this this sort of everymanish quality to River Cartwright, right? I mean, he's aspirational, but not too aspirational. And the contrast between him and Spiderweb, very much the three, is, kind of that tension along the 9-3 line. And, the way we describe it is that it's the neglected strategy for type 9 that's striving to feel outstanding. It's, I want to be outstanding, but I don't want to look like I want to be outstanding. So there's this real
I don't
tension.
want to be that guy.
I don't want to be that guy. That's exactly what it is, right? And you can see that in River. I want to, I want to be a great agent. I want to live up to the reputation of my grandfather. I want to make a difference in the world, but I don't want to look like I'm trying too hard. right? I don't want to look like it means that much to me. And, and so I see River as kind of a relatively healthy version of a type nine. And by that, I mean somebody who's not kind of all the stereotypes of the nine, who's, super self deprecating and, indecisive or lazy or whatever, which again are
or a
usually just,
pushover.
yeah, exactly, which are usually just stereotypes anyway. Um, but yeah, I saw him as a pretty good example of a nine-ish character, which again, uh, what good shows are able to do is to portray an Enneagram type without falling victim to the stereotypes of the Enneagram type. Right. Jackson Lamb, there's all the stereotypes kind of a five in a way, right? I mean, they're not what we might think of as the egghead, withdrawn sort of character. He's much more abrasive than the stereotype of the five. But, clearly, it's a character, right? In a sense. Whereas River's not, right? River's kind of almost forgetful, right? In a way and can blend in easily and so forth. So he's got that nine-ish quality without, the stereotypes. So, thoughts on that?
Yeah. And he's very active and engaged. So one of the
Yes,
major plot points in season 4 is that he, of his own accord, goes off to see
yes,
to trace who sent this assassin to my grandfather's house.
yeah, yeah,
So without checking in with his superiors, just like of his own accord, I'm going to go do this
yes,
unsupported and make
yes,
it happen.
yeah. And he's got the
So
stones to
one
shoot a dead guy in the face with a shotgun to cover his trail. Right? Right.
one of the archetypes, because I hadn't everything you said makes sense, particularly the fact that I just couldn't get a read on him
Yeah,
with the Enneagram because of, as you said, kind of the
yeah,
lack of signifiers ends up
yeah,
being the ultimate hint.
yeah.
But one of the archetypes of type 9 that I have identified through looking and thinking through a lot of movie characters and TV characters were nines is the steady operator.
Mm-hmm.
So the kind of person, like my favorite example of that is Columbo, who
Mm-hmm.
just like, or Dory in Finding Nemo, just keep swimming, just
Yeah,
keep swimming. I'll do my thing. I'll do it steadily. I'll not despair. I'll not get racked with anxiety, but just keep on it.
yes,
Get the
yes,
job done.
yes. Yeah, for sure. And again, I always tell people when talking about the nines, as an executive coach and consultant, I've worked with a lot of nines who are leaders, high up in organizations who do a really good job at it. And it's that steadiness that you're talking about. It's that non-offensiveness. It's that ability to, see other points of view and build collaboration, but to take action, when needed that makes them very successful. And I think we see that in River. I mean, it's almost like River. He's kind of he gets sent to Slough House because he screws something up, and there is this kind of uh, theme throughout the series of him screwing things up. And but he screws things up because he tries, right? I mean, and he does a lot of really good things. So you can see somebody with a huge amount of potential, and I think Jackson Lamb sees that in him, which is why he pays more attention to him than he might some of the other ones. But it's because of that steadiness that you're talking about. Mhm. All right. So, TJ, anything else on slow horses that we haven't talked about yet?
The final moment of season 4, I just thought was so beautifully five. And as we
Yes.
talk about Rivers and nine, I can see it so beautifully as a nine as
Yeah.
well. And that Jackson's at a pub and River joins them, and they do this just brief post-mortem on everything that happened, just in a few lines.
Yeah.
Jackson's got a drink. River asks if he can join him, and Jackson says, "As long as you buy your own drink and don't say anything."
Yeah.
Then they just sit next to each other in silence.
Right.
No sentimentality, no arm
Yes.
thrown around her shoulder, no thank
Yes.
you for your sacrifice, no
Yeah.
holy shit, we almost got killed. Some of
Right.
our other agents were killed. Just like, let's just sit here in silence.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with you, but it was really captured that as well. I thought there was another really great scene that captured the five-ishness of Jackson Lamb. It's when he goes to the other guy's office and who's dead on the floor, right? But as Jackson's banging on the door and calling his name, and he's not answering, so he breaks the window, and we don't know that he's dead on the floor, right? And there's this the camera follows Jackson as he goes into the office. He goes over to the desk. He goes to the phone. He plays the message on the answering machine. And then he walks over to where the body of his old friend is, right? Laying there on the floor, beaten to death, right? And it was just to me how, just captured this real ability to detach, whereas everybody else is kind of throwing up when they see dead bodies and all this sort of stuff. He's just like, yeah, whatever. I've seen this a million times before, and it's just that again, it captures that detachment that he didn't have this look of horror on his face when he goes into that office and sees the dead body there, but instead just remains detached, does what he got to do, and also when he does kind of lean down to you know check the body and that sort of thing, does it with kind of a tenderness, right? And a sensitivity that portrays that he really does care, right? But he's just really, really good at detaching from it. So I thought for me, that really captured a lot about what it means to be a five. All right. Well, TJ, this was fun. I hope you'll find some time to go back and watch the other episodes of Slow Horse. I
I
enjoyed.
fully intend to.
Yeah, I really enjoyed watching seasons 1 and 4 again in preparation for this, and we'll probably watch seasons 2 and 3 again just for fun. But if you have not seen this, viewer, um, watch Slow Horses. You won't be sorry. All right, TJ, this was fun. Until next time. We'll see you later.
Very fun. See you soon.